What's up? Welcome to another episode of Goblin Town Reviews, where today we're reviewing, this is going to be an album review of the All Shall Perish album, The Price of Existence, which came out in 2006.
It's a deathcore album. I believe this is their second album. Is that what it was?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I need to look at the discography again.
Fair.
But it's definitely not, I don't think it's late in their career or anything. No. I think this might even be like one of their most celebrated records.
Yeah.
Based on the reviews, because I was looking at some reviews last night, and the top review was by this guy. He was like, perfect deathcore, 10 out of 10, 100%.
Okay.
And then there were a lot of other people that were like, it's good. It's not like the best deathcore, but it's pretty good.
Yeah.
For like people that listen to a lot of deathcore were like arguing about it.
Yeah.
But like the consensus seemed to be like this was one of the best All Shall Perish records. So
okay. It popped up on my Spotify. That's where I heard about it. I guess this was my pick this week. So I've been listening to Wage Slaves. That was the song. I actually think of one other one, but Wage Slaves was the one I remembered. I liked the energy coming from that one, and that's what led me to do this pick. I was assuming that the album was going to sound similar to that track. Yeah. I was looking forward to that sound.
Yeah, there were a lot of breakdowns in that track, and it really kind of cemented for me that this is deathcore, because I didn't know what it was when we went into it. I when I first listened to it, I knew it was some variation of death metal, but I wasn't quite sure what it was.
Yeah.
And that track, Wage Slaves, really like cemented for me. Okay, I know what I'm dealing with now.
Yeah.
I kind of know what to expect a little bit more. This would have been 2006. I wrote down this would have been the heyday of like metalcore and deathcore, if you think about it, because metalcore really took off in the mid to late 2000s, and I think deathcore would have been right there along with it. So this is kind of like a time capsule.
Yeah.
This album, was a brand new sound back then, you know, that nobody had attempted before.
Yeah. Well, between you, I don't know, Revisit, so I'm really coming to understand metal genres and stuff, and what is what, being able to identify them myself. And this album helped kind of cement the connections in my head for deathcore, because I know deathcore, I listened to some Suicide Silence, but I don't know, there just wasn't a connection to what makes this deathcore versus death metal. But between those specific vocals on this album and all the breakdowns, and I get that this is more of a melodic maybe, but yeah, this is really that deathcore sound.
Yeah, and I think that this type of music would have performed really well in smaller clubs. You ever go see a metal show at a small hole-in-the-wall club, and they have a mosh pit, like a pit area right in front of the stage? I could imagine all those heavy breakdowns. I could imagine people back when this came out just losing their minds in the pit, just break dancing.
Yeah.
What, slam dancing?
Yeah,
that's what it is. Not break dancing, slam dancing to music just like this.
Yeah.
And I think once this type of music performed well in those venues, I think that's when you started to see it really pick up steam as a genre. And then more bands started getting signed by major record labels, and it became a full-fledged thing. It reminds me of certain hardcore bands that I've seen. If the music's constructed the right way, then when that breakdown hits, the audience, they're all liquored up anyway because they've been drinking at the bar for 2 hours. And then by the time that breakdown hits, the audience just goes nuts, and people start moshing and stuff.
Well, dude, I think about how some of that stuff makes me feel whenever I'm in the car And then just imagine if I was in that whole environment and it hit, and
Yeah.
I was like around like everyone who was also feeling the same thing.
Yeah, so this is something that I want, if we get some viewers to watch this video who know more about deathcore, I want you guys to kind of help me out with where the breakdown came from. Is that something that naturally evolved out of death metal? Or is it something that was borrowed from earlier incarnations of hardcore? Or what's the lineage and the history of that aspect in music? You know, where does that come from? I'd be interested to learn that. So
I almost wonder if it's from jazz, like instrumental, because like I mean, literally a breakdown is breaking it down to its most simplistic parts.
yeah,
I feel like you wouldn't think of it as a breakdown, but like some older music would have little like it breaks down to the drums and the bass, and it kind of gives you a nice change in the feel of the song. I don't know.
Yeah.
It just evolved to be heavier, but I'm not sure. I feel like I watched a video on it one time, low key.
No, the thing that the breakdown does is it provides that really like sudden shift in tempo.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where the song, like a lot of these songs kind of start out with like a melodic death metal kind of groove.
Mm-hmm.
And then once that breakdown hits, everything kind of slows up and it's just like. And I think, like, you know, as a listener, that can be very exciting, you know, to have sudden tempo shifts like that, because it makes the music interesting. And it's a trick that they can use. But one critique I have of this record, and we might get into it, is I think if it's used too much, it kind of loses some of its magic, because the listener knows what to expect now. You know, and that's one thing you want to kind of stray away from in certain aspects, is like once the listener knows what's coming, there's something about the freshness or the you know, the novelty of it wears off, and it starts to become kind of like predictable and mundane. And so
I feel like there's like a lot, you have to have a lot of energy for it.
Yeah.
Right, because like otherwise, shit, I don't know. Let me formulate my thought. Well, okay. Well, so breakdown with the themes of like, let's say this album specifically. I was initially I was thinking it was more maybe like kind of anti-capitalist, but as we got through it more, I started to realize I think it's more just like kind of existentialism in general, kind of this like rough existence that we live. And then I mean, like, so I personally just took the anti-capitalist thing quickly. I mean, Wage Slaves was the song that introduced me, but it's more just like that, like that's just another part of being in this existential hell of life. But the breakdowns, they add to the intensity of those themes, of like those heavy themes, heavy music. And like I feel like if you're really like so I was trying to say you have a lot of energy, a lot of like, I guess anger is like an emotion that comes to mind. To keep with it that long, to keep with that many breakdowns.
Yeah.
I feel like you have to be in a certain emotional place where you're like
bench press.
Yeah, I mean, but like, and I'm like, who's that mad for that long, you know? Normally, by the time I listen to 3 songs, I've cooled off a little bit if I'm really pissed off.
Yeah.
But whenever you're sitting down writing a whole album, I guess, you know, it doesn't seem so bunched together, I'm sure.
Well, I'll give you an example that you know. So, This Is It by Necrogoblicon. That song is like, I added it to my playlist and I listen to it all the time. But there's a breakdown right at the end of that song. And I think it goes over really well, and I love it. And I think the reason I love it is because the album isn't chock full of those, you know?
Well, I mean, you also literally think the song's over. You're like, oh, okay, cool, it's the end of the song. I'm expecting the next song.
Exactly. It was unexpected. You're like, wow, like they're really going there.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's an example to me of a breakdown that, like, I love and that went over really well. But yeah, let's talk about some of the. Really, I think this album really grew on me as I listened to it more, and I think the reason is because it has a lot of that kind of mid '90s like In Flames and At the Gates worship in there, especially in a lot of the guitar grooves, particularly the ones they usually start the songs with.
Yeah, there's some good like tapping riffs and shit.
The tapping is awesome. I thought the guitar work on this album was really good, actually. But yeah, it just kind of harkened back to some of that other stuff that I really enjoy, and it kind of gave me an entry point into the album. Instead of it being this totally alien thing, I was able to kind of find something in it that was familiar. And then that kind of like led me into it more, and then I started to appreciate the whole thing, more. So yeah, this thing I think really grew on me, and I think it's like good for me to have this in my rotation, typically like on my Spotify, because Spotify pulls up random song suggestions based on what I listen to. And
yeah, that's how I got this.
Since I started jamming out this album the last week and a half, I've been getting deathcore on my Spotify.
Yeah.
And I think it's expanded my horizons, in a good way.
Yeah.
A way that I'm happy about. I've been trying to get a little bit more into like hardcore and deathcore, and haven't done a little bit of metalcore. Wasn't the Bring Me the Horizon, wasn't that metalcore?
Yeah, but that wasn't. I would think for metalcore, I almost feel like we should visit some of that stuff. Came out around this time.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah, because that was like, I don't know. I was thinking like Six, like All That Remains. Six is on Guitar Hero 2. I think of like that song and like that album. That's like metalcore.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll get there, but yeah, the first song on this, Eradication, I made a note where I said that I thought the drums were a little bit high in the mix, and I was wondering if that was just gonna be unique to that song, or if it was gonna carry through the entire record. And I think most of the record, the drums are placed, where they are. They're pretty high in the mix, and that's typically a feature you find in a lot of modern death metal. The drums and the vocals seem to be hogging up most of the space in the mix. Like if you listen to like Lorna Shore, or you listen to like Slaughter to Prevail, or any of that stuff, the drums are so high, and the music, the guitars sound like they're playing inside of the singer's throat almost, because the vocals, are so like monstrous and so like prominent in the mix. And so I think this is kind of the way this album is even mixed, I think was kind of a foreshadowing to what you would see come later in forms of death metal and deathcore that would come around 10, 15 years later even.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that was pretty cool. But
I'm trying to, because with the drums being high in the mix, I think that played into like the dynamics of the whole album. It's like, what was that? I was talking about this one time, but so I thought the beginning could use a little more like dynamic range and like the sound, because it was just like so up front in your face, and and with the drums mixed so high, that might have added to some of that.
Yeah.
But like with all the blast, like I don't know, it was just like the first, how many songs? Like 4. Like the whole like top half of the record, I was just kind of like waiting for it to slow down, like it started to finally. And I thought that was not like super needed, but it was like super refreshing to hear. And I do think it was like kind of necessary, because there was plenty of variety. They were like doing all sorts of different, techniques and everything. I wasn't like unimpressed or anything. It was just like my brain wanted just like the slightest break. From like the blast beat into the next thing and blah blah blah. But it was all good. I do like, and all the tracks individually, I enjoyed, for like the reasons we've talked about with like the riffs and stuff. They had some good like open note riffs. Yeah. Those can get old, but I didn't think they got old on this album.
That's pretty much the name of the game in death metal, is like open
Yeah.
Open riffs, open note riffs. But yeah, I just thought that the one track I wanted to bring attention to is "There Is No Business to Be Done on a Dead Planet."
Mm-hmm.
I thought the guitar tone was really cool, and I heard some pig squeals, what sounded like pig squeals on that song. And I don't know, maybe I'm jumping the gun on saying pig squeals, but that's another thing that's, I guess, common in deathcore and slam, is that vocal. It's like it sounds weird. I don't even know how they make it, but it's like, sounds like a pig, right? Sounds like an animal. But I just thought, the bigger point I'm trying to make is I thought the vocals on this album were actually pretty varied and interesting, and it wasn't just the same delivery every time.
Yeah, I have
and that was pretty cool.
Yeah, in Eradication, at like the very beginning, you get him and the guitar both squeal. Like, yeah. I wrote "squeal piggy" guitar and vocals.
Yeah, it's pretty cool because I mean, in death metal, it's tough because with the genre expectation is the guttural growls, right? Like Cannibal Corpse is probably the biggest culprit for like setting that standard.
Yeah.
That everybody follows. But every once in a while, man, you get somebody who's got either a very unique voice, like a unique growl where you know who it is as soon as you hear him, like Chuck from Death, right? You know his yeah. Or you get the other, which is like they're doing different stuff. They're doing like the low gutturals, and they've got like high screams, and then they've got like pig squeals, and there might be some spoken word in there, and then maybe some vocal harmonies in there, and like when that happens, I love it because it's like the artist is just throwing you so many left hooks, and you don't know what to expect from the vocals anymore. You feel like it could go any way.
Yeah.
And they're kind of putting a middle finger up to the genre standard of like it has to be this way.
Frankie. Yeah, it's like you good? I lost my train of thought because of the cat. What'd you just say?
Well, for example, like I don't know if you've heard of Duran Gray, but Duran Gray is like kind of like a Japanese death metal band.
Yeah.
And
because I learned. I watched a video one time, and the guy like was talking about a vocal technique where you just like squeak. But inhale, exhale. But if you do it into the mic and you're like real quick and you throw like distortion on it, that's how the Duran Gray guy gets some of those like really piercing like. He just goes with distortion.
His name's Kyo.
Kyo.
He's got like a 5-octave vocal range, which is like insane. He's one of my favorite vocalists. I call him like the Japanese Mike Patton. There's like periods where he'll sound like King Diamond, and then other times he'll sound like Danny Filth from Cradle of Filth, and then other times he does like the Chris Barnes like low gutturals, and it's all mixed in there together. And then he also sings. So like but they're a death metal band is why it's relevant. It's like it's like, man, that's cool. I love it. And this wasn't to that extent, but what I'm saying is that there was enough for variation in there to make it cool, to make it interesting, in my opinion, on this album.
Yeah, I mean, feel like they set themselves up, like, so I was saying there wasn't a lot of dynamics at the beginning, but there's a lot of variety, and they set themselves up very well, like, as you get halfway through the album, you're like, I don't know what the next song's gonna sound like. Yeah. Necessarily. I mean, like, even if it is, like, all in my face, it's still gonna, I don't know, sound different.
I think that's got to be one of the biggest challenges when you get into genres like deathcore and death metal is making sure the songs don't all sound the same.
Yeah. Well, because, we talked about the breakdowns earlier. I could get back into that now. They really did just sound, like, the same. Like, in my head, every single one, like, they just came in, like, and I was not every single one, but, like, at the top of the album. What I wrote on the... No Business on a Dying Planet, Dead Planet. I wrote down that the breakdown wasn't special on that one because it was just da-da, da-da, da-da,
Yeah.
da-da.
There's you have some like some albums like Angel Dust by Faith No More. You probably haven't listened to any Faith No More. You may be familiar with a few songs, but there's an example of an album that's considered alternative metal.
Yeah.
So we're talking in the same vein as like, you know, Primus or Tool or like System of a Down or Deftones or
that
something
90s
like that. Yeah, so that album is special to me because every song is totally different from each other. And like I promise you, if you listen to it, you won't know what the next one's going to sound like because they keep like switching it up from different genres, different styles, different song structures. Everything's always different.
Yeah.
So to me, that's a really special album, but it's hard to find that in these extreme genres because even though the extreme genre, as it evolved, it was being propelled forward by these innovative ideas and we were pushing the envelope. After a while, those genre tropes and expectations become sort of like solidified. And so you're kind of in this box, you know, and you're kind of like trying to innovate, but you're still inside this box of like doing extreme whatever. And so I think the result is, and I know a lot of these artists are doing the best they can, but a lot of times you'll listen to death metal records, like especially the newer ones, a lot of the new ones that come out, it seems like most of the songs, like the album itself could just be one big song, you know, like one long song and it'd be fine. That's kind of like a gripe I have about extreme music lately in general, but I don't think this album was too guilty of that, but it was a little bit monotonous. But yeah, that's you're gonna come across that pretty much, you know, 98% of the artists you listen to in these genres, it's gonna be there. That's what it's gonna be. It's gonna be like, you know, what sticks out to me, what can kind of like vary it up would be the inclusion of different instruments, different vocal techniques, different melodic lines, like memorable melodies that stick with you that you can associate that, okay, that's that song. It has this part that goes like this, you know.
Yeah.
Or like the Necrogoblicon, like it's so eclectic that you never get bored listening to it.
Yeah.
Because it's always changing, you know, from song to song. So but like I was gonna say, most of the time when you're listening to these extreme genres, you're gonna get a lot of the same thing over and over again. So I mean, what are your thoughts? That's sort of like my opinion, but well.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, the last Relapse, whenever that one came in with like the chorus, the whole like or choir, it was unexpected and it fit. It was very nice, and it was like I liked that it was like, okay, it's time to wrap this up.
Yeah,
like, I liked that vibe that it was like, okay.
And I wrote more on the last Relapse than I did on any other song on the record.
Oh yeah.
I had more things to say because there was more happening.
I liked how it crescendoed throughout like the first like half of it.
Yeah, they had some acoustic guitar thrown in there, a guitar solo, clean vocals, even though they were choir vocals, but they were still clean. You know, like you said, piano and strings at the beginning. There was just, it seemed like they really went to great lengths to make sure that last track, that closer, really stood out. You know, which is really cool because, you know, you want to kind of, the closer is kind of like a special place on a track listing. It's kind of got to have something about it that kind of distinguishes it. It doesn't have to, but that's like the conventional thinking is like, you want to make sure the closer does its job as far as leaving the listener with a good impression of the album, or maybe like being the final statement of the album.
Yeah.
So it's got kind of an extra bit of importance attached to it.
Yeah, I mean,
for the other
for this album, it had a sense of completion, of wrapping it up. I mean, there's infinite emotions that an album could want you to walk away with, but like this one leaves you with a nice like that was the album.
Yeah.
Here we are.
But the songs never got stagnant.
No,
you know?
Yeah.
I thought they were well written songs.
Yeah. They slowed up real nice. Had that, I think it was Shorter Grayson, or was it basically just a guitar solo?
Yeah, it was a guitar interlude.
Yeah.
Grayson was kind of, and it was kind of like placed. It was couched in the middle of the album, so I think.
Was it 7?
Like when we were listening to it, I think it was kind of intended to be like a brief like break.
Yeah.
From the brutal. Yeah. Relentlessness.
No, I mean literally just what I wanted, just a little sooner.
But I thought overall, I thought this was a good to great album.
Yeah.
I liked a lot of the guitar riffage. The breakdowns is not a deal breaker for me. It's not going to be my favorite thing I listen to, but I'll definitely mix it in there with the rest of the stuff I'm listening to right now and continue listening to it. Maybe after time I'll end up adding some of the songs to my playlist, and we'll just have to see. But yeah, this is kind of outside of my wheelhouse a little bit, even though it's inspired by some things that I really love. It's a different take on death metal than what I'm used to.
Yeah, it was I mean, it's like I don't have a whole lot of expectations, so for me personally it was just I don't know, caught my ear. It was catchy. I don't know if that's the right word to use, but
yeah.
That's, I mean, things that I like, things like this, they catch my ear for a reason. There's a certain catchiness. And maybe it depends, like that catchiness can come from different areas. With this album, it might have been the melodic like guitars. The groove definitely would attract me. I mean, in the breakdowns, even though like listening to the album all together, like I said, but like individually, it's a breakdown in a song, let's break it down, bitch.
Yeah, maybe this album would be better taken in like a few songs at a time instead
Certain
of listening
ones.
to like all the way through.
Maybe.
Like
if you, I mean, yeah, I just feel like it needs a little bit, for it to be a more complete album, I think it would need just a little bit more softness. Just a little bit. Especially in those earlier tracks. Because once you get to like, it was like prison something. I closed my book too early.
I think it's called
Prisoner of War.
Prisoner of War, yeah.
I think that one kind of slowed down. 5. There we go. Better Living Through Catastrophe, whatever. I wrote down that I wish that it stayed a little bit slower. I don't remember exactly how it sounded, but I wish that it stayed like at the maybe not slow, but just the slower pace that it was at, but like keeping like that slow intensity. I think this album could have used a little bit of more like slow intensity, like what the breakdowns were bringing, but without it being a breakdown, just like within the verses, having those be slow and intense. Because I feel like they relied on the breakdowns to slow down. This is the first time I've had this thought, an epiphany. They relied on the breakdowns for the slowdowns and the changes in paces. And so every single breakdown was like a big slowdown to the
yeah.
Because I think on this scene, was this the one that I wrote? Yeah, I would have thought, I saw the breakdown coming, and I was like, I don't think they're going to do this, but it would be really dope if instead of it breaking down slow, it did a fast guitar solo or something.
Yeah.
And kind of was like, blah. But I think that would have helped make it a more complete album. I do think it's still a good one. That just would have made it great.
Yeah.
Great out.
Like I said, I think it's good, not great, but I
actually enjoyed it quite a bit.
Would I find a deathcore album that I would think was great. I don't know. Like the only deathcore band that I've ever listened to a lot, is Rings of Saturn. And Rings of Saturn has a couple of records that to me are just awesome. But I don't think they're in the same, like, I don't really think they're akin to this band particularly. Because Lucas Mann's guitar playing is just like otherworldly, and the songs are so screwed up.
Suicide Silence. I'd recommend. I haven't even listened to it. I know No Pity for a Coward. That's on The Cleansing. I think I've heard good things about The Cleansing as like a classic deathcore
album.
Yeah, I mean Mitch Lucker's like.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to get back to more deathcore. But yeah, I'm not sure at this point whether my rating of this album is fair, because it's hard for me to be objective, because my brain is wired to accept like a certain kind of death metal.
That's good. And like this is
like a subgenre of death metal that's a little bit different from what I'm used to.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more into like the technical and the more progressive stuff.
Well, you're talking about incorporating it more into your listening. Sounds like you're like, huh? I'll listen to it more, see what I think of it. Like for realsies, you know?
Yeah.
Give it the test of time.
I think that my metalhead community that I grew up around, like they kind of like shunned this style because I think it was the influence from hardcore. I think that's what they didn't like about it. So,
yeah, because it was punk.
So anything that was punk. Like,
we don't like punk.
So anything like core, anything that had core on the end of it, like grindcore, deathcore, metalcore,
crapcore,
it was all like shunned pretty much and turned a blind ear to.
Yeah.
And now I'm trying to get into that stuff, and it's hard because I've been conditioned to like this other stuff. So
yeah,
I think I'm struggling. I'm having an internal battle with my own conditioning right now and trying to overcome it.
It's so interesting because like you've talked about, and it seems like you've broken away from it, but like you come from not like elitism, but like I don't know, just like there's a you don't like the core stuff. You don't like when things start to change, or like your family, or like the people you've been around.
Yeah.
They don't like when things start to change, I guess. But like, I feel like you've opened up to it the way you talk about it, because you say things like with this album, like you have these reserves.
Yeah.
But like you don't dislike it. I do think there are some things that maybe you do dislike. I can't think of a specific example. But I don't know.
Well, this to me seems more like a bridge, right? So this is kind of like
you seem willing to listen and not immediately dismiss something. Like you know that you have that bias, and that's enough.
Yeah. Well, I think this album really gets into stuff that you'd hear on In Flames' early albums, or like At the Gates, Slaughter of the Soul, or something like that. Carcass, Heartwork, stuff like that. And that's more like home cooking for me. So when I hear those riffs in here, I'm like, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like it's got that in there, so I can't totally like throw the whole thing out and be like, oh, this is just garbage, because it's clearly taking and borrowing from forms of metal that I typically like. So but yeah, overall I'm gonna hold out hope that I can find a better deathcore album out there. That's what I'm gonna do.
Okay. Were there any tracks though? I thought you said that you added some, or like there's some that you would go back to.
I highlighted some tracks. There Is No Business to Be Done on a Dead Planet. I like that one. I like Better Living Through Catastrophe. I liked Grayson. I liked We Hold These Truths. The Last Relapse was really cool. The Closer. There were some tracks I liked. I just don't know if I could listen to them in isolation and just like rock out to them.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, because you've only been listening to them in the context of the album.
Yeah, because, I have like a list, like a playlist with like 200 songs on it.
Yeah.
And like if I come across a song on there that I don't like, I'm like, why is this on here? And I delete it.
Yeah, 200 isn't like that many songs.
So like because those are like my top songs. So like, I don't want to add one of these to that list and then just skip over it all the time and not listen to it. So, and then end up taking it off anyways. So I don't know. I wasn't in love with this record, but there was enough there to make me curious to explore the genre more. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. I enjoyed it. I wish I gave it a little bit more of a listen. I'm bad about doing that. It's like homework, but I'm working on it. But yeah, I do hope I listen to this more, and I personally, I'd recommend it. The melody, like the melodic deathcore, melodic death metal-y In Flames elements. That's what I liked about it. That's what'll keep me listening to it, even if I'm not like focusing on it. I did like the sounds that were in my ears in the background.
Yeah. So guys, thanks for watching another episode of Goblin Town Reviews, and let us know in the comment section what album you'd like to see us review or what songs you'd like to see us react to. Like, comment, subscribe, and my name is Scott.
I'm Brandon.
And we'll see you in the next episode.
See ya.